Hello and welcome to a new episode of So French. In this show we give you everything about the twists and turns of French politics and an insight to all things French.
We select the best, most interesting and fascinating of French news stories, all brought to you from our studio near the Eiffel Tower, not far away, literally a stone's throw. My name is Stefan de Vries.
And my name is Sara
And this week we talk about the death of a statesman. Former French President Jacques Chirac passed away last week, prompting days of extreme rolling media coverage, overshadowing what could have been France's worst industrial disaster in decades.
And how a paralyzed Frenchman got up from his wheelchair and walked. Stefan, a divine intervention? Or, well...
Maybe more.
We'll tell you all about the story behind this.
But first, we talk about black rain. Last week in Rouen, west of Paris, there was a huge fire in a chemical plant. 5,000 tons of chemicals ignited in an American factory. Rouen, a big city, about 200,000 people, just in Normandy. It was a big fire, huge explosions. And an enormous ash cloud, or what was it exactly?
And it burned for almost 24 hours.
Yeah.
So it was not just a small thing. It was, ongoing for a very long time. And yes, spreading. What was actually being spread? Because that is one of the questions here.
Absolutely, yeah. They published a list after a week of speculations about what was exactly in the factory, but it was not really clear what went up in smoke, which chemicals had burned. So it's a huge fire, and very quickly, schools were closed in the region of Rouen. They stayed closed for 1 or 2 or 3, even 3 days, some areas. And people started publishing photos on social media of black oil smoke coming down in their gardens or on their cars. And at the same time, there was, of course, a breaking news, this big fire. But then Chirac died at that very moment. And then suddenly nobody spoke about Rouen anymore. But the story doesn't stop there. Actually, it's only started because, what happened after the fire, Sarah?
But the big thing has been that immediately after the fire, and only hours after the fire, authorities came out and said that there was no risk for the population. And just to mention also that this factory was really close to the apartment buildings. So it's sort of surrounded by big apartment blocks and things like that. So it's very central. It's not a fabric that was kept outside of the outside of the city. But officials immediately came out, said there are no risks. And actually, on the day of the morning, the same day as this fire, the schools were supposed to remain open. And some teachers arrived in school and some children as well. But, they quite immediately decided that it was not possible to continue because, they knew nothing about the risks either for the teachers or for the students, of course.
Yeah. So even when the fire was still going on, the government officials already said, "Don't worry, it's nothing harm."
Yes, and there were very, very few. I mean, what the population has been complaining about, that is for a long time there was no real indication on how to deal with this. People have been testifying about, no instructions as to how should they leave, which direction should they go, when could they come back, what has to be, taken, what can be. I mean, could you touch it, or should you definitely stay away from it? I mean, there was no indication of how to deal with this kind of the downfall.
Yeah, and the préfet, which is the local representative of the government, so the most important authority in the region, he didn't even want to answer questions, right? He was very arrogant, and he said, "No, just move on. There's nothing to see here."
And the whole, as you mentioned, then the whole coverage about this disaster was overshadowed with the death of Jacques Chirac. So we saw for 4 days all of the country's media outlets being fully concentrated on the death of a former president. And it's only been, over this last week that, Rouen has been brought back up on the front pages, and the real tough questions have been starting to be asked. And, as a result of this, finally the list of the chemicals was officialized this week, and more and more tests are being made, etc. But we're now a week, as we're recording this, we're a week after the disaster.
Yeah. And the Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, he visited the site and he said again, there is no harm for health. There are no health risks.
And he said this without knowing, which I find very interesting, because since they don't have the test results yet, how could he says that it's uncomfortable because it smells and it sticks and, you don't feel well, but it's not dangerous. But I am just very curious to know that how can you give such an assurance when no one has received the full test results? And
there are calls for an independent research, an independent expert panel that would investigate, but the préfet said once again, I don't want independent experts. So it's a really strange story. And of course, the locals, and even now more people in France, they say we cannot trust the government with these results because, of course, the relations between the French and the government are very complicated. There's much less trust in government and other authorities than in other countries, so north of Europe or in Germany, for instance. But they also have a right to blame the government, right? There's a story.
But there is we can clearly say that the track record for French authorities when it comes to warning and giving instructions for the population in times of crisis is not that good. I mean, we don't have to go very far back. Only a couple of months we had the disaster at the big fire of the Notre Dame de Paris,
exactly,
where it was weeks. It took weeks before the authorities started to look into the fact that a lot of lead actually was released during the fire and then fell down on the neighborhoods close by. But then if you go a little bit further back in time, in the 1986, French authorities, and this is quite amazing, actually claimed, when in the middle of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, claimed that the cloud from Chernobyl disaster stopped at the French border.
Absolutely. And we have a little soundbite of the news of that night, of the week of the 26th of April in 1986. Let's have a listen.
Que cette poussière aspirée depuis l'Ukraine serait renvoyée vers l'Italie, la Yougoslavie et l'Autriche. En France, l'anticyclone des Açores s'est développé. La météo affirme qu'il restera jusqu'à vendredi prochain suffisamment puissant pour offrir une véritable barrière de protection. Il bloque en effet toutes les perturbations venant de l'Est.
So this is the official news saying, don't worry, the cloud will stop at the border. And there was actually, of course, France has a huge nuclear power. Almost all the electricity comes from nuclear power. They have the atomic bomb, so the nuclear sector is pretty powerful. Absolutely. But then, just bluntly, the government and the news, they were lying to the people.
And this has become a joke here in France. Everybody talks about this, how, we all know that the clouds that stopped at the border. But at the same time, there are much more serious consequences to this. And it is, as we said, the fact that people just don't trust authorities. So if we go back to Rouen, the problem is that maybe the authorities are right. Maybe there is no risk whatsoever. But, who will know? How can you be sure that if there was a risk, they would have told us? So, and this is something very, very serious in French society at the moment, and especially in these kind of situations, because you also have then, people maybe, you have, of course, personal consequences for people if they're they're scared for their health. And they decide to leave, to sell their house, or just leave everything. And extreme personal consequences. And maybe if there is no risk, maybe for nothing.
No, it's really a very complicated issue because People just don't trust authorities here in general, and of course that means if you don't trust authorities, you don't trust your neighbors. It has a huge impact on how this society is organized, and unfortunately, with the big fire in Rouen last week, we see it once again. So that's one issue. But then, of course, there are also very practical consequences. For instance, Normandy is very well known for agriculture. There are a lot of farmers in the region. Camembert, for instance, indeed.
And
cidre,
butter, milk,
absolutely.
a lot of dairy products.
Yeah. So what happens with
well,
those farmers?
So this big cloud, of course, did not stop at the city border of Rouen. Of course, this cloud moved on to other municipalities, to other regions. It's actually 5 departments that are départements that are concerned now by this black rain that fell down from after the fire. 206 municipalities, and it's of concern for more than 2,000 farmers. So more than 2,000 farmers are not allowed to sell their produce until, all the results have been completed, etc. So the economic consequences are, of course, immense. I mean, they're so big, and we can't, at the moment, the authorities have said that they will pay the farmers for what they're missing out in income. But I mean, it's not only what the actual money that you make. I mean, what's going to happen with the cows if it turns out? I mean, it's just only the milk that you can't sell. Many farmers are worried about whether the cows will have to, go to the slaughterhouse altogether, because, if you can't use them and if you can't work with them anymore, it might be the end of it. So, I mean, there are very, very serious consequences and a lot of worry among a lot of people in an area known for its agriculture. Yeah,
indeed. And not only the locals are concerned, but also I heard a story on the radio earlier this week that the firefighters, of course, they were protected. But then, of course, very quickly the police arrived, the riot police, CRS, to secure the area, and they had no protection whatsoever. So they went into this chemical plant with a lot of probably toxic fumes, and they had no protection whatsoever. So they are very worried about their health as well. It's quite astonishing that in 2019 something like this can happen, and then especially the way the government reacts.
And just to say that the whole problem with the smell and the sticky air is not over, and this is more than a week then after the disaster. People are still saying that they can be hard to breathe, and you can really feel the effect, and you still feel the fumes in the air.
Absolutely.
Week later.
So I think we'll talk about this again in the future if we know more about what happened in Rouen.
Vous écoutez So French.
You are listening to So French.
Well, now we mentioned it briefly when we were talking about Rouen and the fire. But the reason why a lot of this went unnoticed, or at least got very little media coverage, was because a former French president, former Paris mayor as well, Jacques Chirac, left this earth the same day as the Rouen fire, actually, last Thursday, and since then, Stefan, we have witnessed a rolling media coverage. That I have rarely seen before.
Absolutely. No, it was quite astonishing. It lasted for at least 5 days. So the day when he died, Chirac, was on a Thursday, until the day he was buried. So that was on a Monday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It was all the channels, 24 hours a day, they only spoke about Chirac, as if, some hero who single-handedly found a cure for cancer, found peace in the Middle East, and made everybody happy. Like Mère Thérèse died. It was very, I totally agree. In all these years that we've been living here, it was completely berserk. It was actually an orgy. And of course, the man, his death was not a surprise. I mean, the man was 80 years old.
Yeah, and he has been ill for a long time.
Absolutely.
He has been out of the public.
All the media had years to prepare his necrology, and yet I don't know what happened, Sarah.
But I think that one of the facts is that media had time to prepare because we knew that he was ill. I mean, he hadn't been seen in public since 2014.
Yeah.
And he's been, out of public office since 2007. So, I mean, and everybody knew that his health was very, very frail. So the preparations were already done, as it is. And we must just say, in all media outlets, there are always preparations for people who are likely to pass away.
Yeah.
It might sound a bit cynical, but that's how it works.
Absolutely.
People work with to collect information of people's life, etc., to be able to as soon as possible. As cynic as it might sound.
Yeah.
But in this case, they had a long time, and there was talk about him being very, very bad the days leading up to his death. But yes, it's interesting because it was not only, I mean, yes, you can imagine the 24-hour news channels would go all, 100% Chirac, but even Libération, left-wing newspaper, they also did big coverage of Jacques Chirac's death.
Yeah.
But it's one thing. I mean, we can also talk about the fact that it's one thing you cover the life and politics of a politician. But there was very little talk about the more controversial sides of Jacques Chirac. There was a lot of talk about how he said no.
In
to
2003.
the word. Exactly.
Yeah.
Was a lot of talk about that. It was a lot of talk about how he his Lebanon connections, for example, how he was the only statesman who arrived at the funeral for former Prime Minister Hariri and etc. It was a lot of talk about that, but very little talk about those nuclear tests
in Polynesia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And very little talk as well about the fact that he's actually the only French president who has been convicted of corruption.
Yeah. 2 years imprisonment. But he was too ill to go to prison already, so he never went to prison. But still, this was a corrupt president, and you can't mention it enough. But apparently the French totally forgot, because most of the stories we saw and read in the media were all these memories of former politicians, but also normal people who told how friendly he was, how charming, how he loved to eat French food, and all these personal things. And actually, it was very rarely mentioned that he was just a crook. He was a very charming one, but a crook nevertheless. And that's, I think I really don't understand why the media went completely bonkers on the death of Jacques Chirac, and it was really sometimes very embarrassing.
And we even saw, now the socialist mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, publishing this very emotional homage to Jacques Chirac. In the name of the Parisians, and thanking him for everything he did for
in
Paris.
Our name as well.
Exactly, and without even mentioning, the guy is convicted of having, stolen money from the Parisians.
Yeah, from the local town hall. Yeah,
and I think that no one is questioning the fact that of course you have to be respectful, and he was a politician for a very long time, and many French people really grew up with him as a central figure in French politics, but very little talk about those more controversial sides of his of his career.
And also his political heritage is actually not very impressive. When he was a president, he didn't do a lot.
He's known for being a president. His second mandate is known for being the mandate of nothing, because he actually didn't push through with anything.
No.
Apparently, he was very afraid of of, dividing the French. And in the beginning of his second mandate, very afraid he didn't knew how to bridge that growing divide. So he decided to not even try to go there. And then, he had a stroke during his tenure, and after that, many say that it was more difficult for him to actually work.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should not forget to mention that in 2002, when he was elected for the second mandate, he was elected against Jean-Marie Le Pen, and he was elected with 85% of the votes. Some African dictatorship would be very jealous of this score, but many people blame him for the fact that he had also all the left-wing voters voted for him because they didn't want to vote for the extreme right, and he never ever did something for them. So
he never thanked them for their
votes. He promised a lot, but he never bridged actually his policies with the left-wing voters. And indeed, he was more or less paralyzed. But as soon as he was no longer a president in 2007, when he was succeeded by Nicolas Sarkozy, he became one of the most popular figures in France. And I think a lot of French also see in him some kind of idea or a myth of France that has disappeared, like a womanizer, good food, a big mouth in international politics.
Un bon vivant.
A bon vivant. And I think also, a lot of people were maybe sad about the loss of, I saw that some media spoke about him as a father of the country.
I know also that many we heard a lot in the media coverage about, France mourning its former father or at least president. But it was quite interesting as well that there has been the Élysée Palace, the presidential palace here in Paris, opened up on the night of his death, the doors to the Élysée Palace so that French, and foreigners as well, could come in and write in the book of condolences. So there was this possibility of people to express their grief, etc. The number of people who actually did that, it's not staggering. The numbers are not staggering. And when we saw when it was the funeral on Monday, of course you have these images of the coffin, going through the streets of Paris, etc. But when you look at the images, not that many people came out. No. So there is also this question of, yes, of course, people can feel sad, and you have people who will always express their strong feelings when someone passes away. But how important and how big was actually the grief of the French people? I'm not sure that it was as big as the 4-5 day rolling media coverage actually wanted to make it sound like.
Yeah, no, I think it's really something very Parisian. All the media, of course, are based in Paris. I think the rest of the country, I wonder if when Hollande dies, or Sarkozy, or Macron, if there would be the same orgy of media attention. I'm not quite sure.
Well, hopefully we will not find out in a very long time.
No, but when we do, we'll talk about it in So French.
Now, to some more positive and actually quite fascinating news, and it could be the proof of God. I don't know, Stefan, a completely paralyzed man here in France actually learned and can now move again.
Yeah, that's actually it's a proof of science, because this is a very impressive scientific undertaking. Indeed, a man has been able to move all 4 of his limbs again with an exoskeleton suit. Now, an exoskeleton suit is like a sort of a robot suit that helps to move your limbs and your muscles. It's also sometimes used more and more by soldiers because they become much more powerful. So it looks like a sort of a Robocop if you wear it. But the more interesting thing or fascinating thing is that this paralyzed man, he is controlling this exoskeleton with his brain.
Wow.
That's indeed, the guy is called Thibault. He's only 30 years old, and he became paralyzed a couple of years ago, by an accident. And what the scientists did, they implanted, on the surface of his brain, so under his skull, sensors that capture the part of the brain that controls movement. It's really fascinating, and it's about the size of a big coin, the sensors, and they put this in his head, and the brain waves of Thibaut, they send messages to the robot, to the exoskeleton, and that makes it move. So if Thibaut thinks, I want to move my legs, then the legs move. So he's still paralyzed, but the exoskeleton that he's wearing around him with a computer and very sophisticated little motors and stabilizers, they respond to what he thinks.
Wow, this is
really.
What this could lead to is, of course, incredible, and the impact it could have on paralyzed people's lives.
Absolutely. It is a test that started in 2017 by Clinatech, which is part of the University of Grenoble, which is in the Alps. They have been testing it for 2 years. And this week they published actually their research into The Lancet, the very famous medical scientific magazine. So it was approved by peers, so it's also medically approved. And it's really fascinating. And of course, it's really new, and the scientists are still researching and developing it, and they say they are continuing to refine the technology. It is basically now limited by the amount of data that can be read from the brain, because the brain is, of course, bigger than the biggest supercomputer in the world, because otherwise the computer can't follow the brain. And it only takes 350 milliseconds to go from thought to movement. So it's almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
Yeah, and it's just a fascinating story. It's of course
difficult for this guy though to do several things at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, you have to be stay focused on one thing because otherwise maybe the computer is getting a bit lost.
Yeah, but it's fascinating because it means there's a hope for handicapped people, paralyzed people, and it's really interesting because they've been working 2 years with this person, of course. And it's just, if you look at the images, it's really fascinating. We'll put a link to a video on our website, sofrench.news, so you can judge for yourself. But maybe this is a whole new step to, I don't know, how your body works. Maybe one day, if we're just hanging in the couch watching Netflix, we only need to think that we want to see Stranger Things now, or maybe House of Cards, instead of moving our body.
I see, and you really see the
remote control.
The big and most important things that we could learn from this experiment.
Absolutely, it's amazing scientific progress. So this week coming from Grenoble.
That wraps up this edition of So French. We hope you have enjoyed it. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and we are also on Instagram. Our account is @SoFrenchNews. Please follow us there.
And if you like French music, you can check out our free playlist on Spotify, which we update regularly. Just search for So French Music or click the link on our website. And if you would like to contact us, please mail us on news@sofrench.news.
You can also listen to us on air on World Radio Paris, the station, with a lot of excellent shows in English, not only in the Paris region, but also now on Côte d'Azur around Monaco, Nice and Cannes. So French is broadcast at 2:30 p.m. local time on Saturday, and then there are reruns during the week.
We'll be back in 2 weeks again with a new episode of So French.
We hope you will join us then. Thank you for listening.
Au revoir.